My boss fired me after 15 years of work, and a few months later I took his place. My name is Merrill Costin. I'm 58 years old, and until less than an hour ago, I was the senior systems analyst at Pinewood Valley Regional Hospital in southern Missouri, a 325-bed community lifeline nestled between two highways and a stubborn river. For the past 15 years, I was the quiet hand behind every alert that didn't trigger, every patient record that loaded in under a second, every chart that stayed protected when ransomware came knocking. You don't see folks like me in hospital newsletters. You hear our names only when something breaks. And in 15 years, nothing critical ever did. But all that came to a quiet end this morning at 9:47 a.m. A short meeting, 20 minutes, including pleasantries, ended a career that had outlasted 3 administrators, 2 major infrastructure upgrades, and more sleepless nights than I can count. Across the table sat Dr. Linwood Ashbury, our newly appointed executive director. Linwood is 41, holds an MBA from an institution I'd never heard of, and had spent the previous 5 years as a consultant for a large healthcare corporation in Arizona. Before arriving, he'd never set foot in a Missouri hospital that wasn't under contract. "This hospital is moving into a new era," he said, looking not at me, but at the oak-framed degree behind my shoulder. "We've reviewed your department, Merrill. Your systems are reliable, but they're not adaptable. We need an infrastructure that evolves. Agile. Scalable. Cloud-forward." Next to him, 1 foot tapping like a metronome, was his tech advisor, a fellow named Parker Wynn. Young, dressed too sharply for comfort, face mostly buried in a phone. He hadn't asked me a single question in the 3 weeks he'd been conducting his evaluation. "We've decided to proceed with an external consulting firm to handle the migration," Linwood continued. "That will mean a change in staffing, starting today." He slid a folder across the table. "Your severance is 2 months' salary, standard NDA. Legal's reviewed everything." I didn't reach for it. Not yet. It felt strange, being dismissed by someone who didn't know the name of our pharmacy integration system. Who hadn't stayed through the blizzard in 2019 when the power flickered for 12 hours. Who didn't see me crawl behind server Unit 7 to reroute cabling during the electrical fire last fall. I looked at Parker. He was smiling, not smugly, just absent-mindedly, as though thinking about lunch. 15 years. Not once had our core patient management system gone down on my watch. Not during the statewide outage in 2020, not during the surge that winter COVID returned, not even when my staff was halved and I was working 80-hour weeks to keep emergency services online. "The security team will help you collect your belongings," Linwood added. "We'll need your badge and system credentials by end of day." I slowly unpinned my ID card and laid it on the desk. "The master keys are stored in the encrypted partition labeled Readridge_01, I said. "Credentials are in the documentation, secured by multi-auth." Linwood smiled like a man congratulating himself. "Good. I'm glad you're being professional about this. Change is never easy, Merrill. But it's necessary. Necessary." That word had echoed too often in this office lately. Necessary meant cheaper. Meant newer. Meant younger. I wasn't necessary anymore. "There's one thing I want to say," I began. "Not anger, just clarity." He leaned forward. But I said nothing. Just shook my head slightly. I'd documented everything. I'd handed over the system. They thought that meant they had it. "No," I said. "Nothing else." I walked past the nursing station that still had the old paper schedule I'd laminated when the scheduling module crashed in 2012. Past the IT alcove where a dozen late-night pizzas had been shared over debugging sessions. Past the radiology wing where Dr. Lucinda Ray once called me a miracle worker after I recovered a day's worth of lost scans. In the parking lot, I opened my truck door and gently set the cardboard box, filled with a picture of Catherine and me, a 2014 holiday mug from the lab techs, and a book of quotes my daughter gave me last Christmas, on the passenger seat. Then I turned the key and drove away. No rearview mirror glances. No bitterness. Just a strange hollowness. They didn't want my experience. They didn't want my loyalty. What they wanted was silence. They would have it, for now. I started at Pinewood Valley just after my 50th birthday. It wasn't the job I thought I'd be doing at that age. I'd spent most of my adult life in private sector tech, data centers, logistics platforms, business intelligence systems. But in 2009, the economy fell off a cliff. My contracts dried up. And Catherine's lymphoma treatment costs were stacking up like a losing hand in poker. I needed stability. And health insurance. Pinewood Valley wasn't high-tech. The systems were dated. The databases ran on old versions of software nobody trained for anymore. It was a patchwork, held together by persistence and coffee. But it had purpose. I took the job thinking I'd stay for a year or two. I stayed 15. In those early days, I worked alongside the hospital's director, Dr. Wayland Sears. He was in his 60s then, nearing retirement, and he'd seen enough new systems crash in the middle of surgeries to be cautious about tech revolutions. Pretty graphs don't save patients, Merrill, he'd say, tapping his temple. Reliability does. He was right. So I built reliable systems. Unremarkable, maybe. But they worked. And when they didn't, I worked. I added manual overrides when the digital signature pad kept failing in the NICU. I wrote fallback scripts for pharmacy inventory updates when the third-party software got fussy. I rebuilt entire modules in-house when vendors priced us out of support. I wasn't chasing innovation, I was preserving continuity. Continuity, it turns out, is invisible when it's working. I missed family birthdays. I stayed late during snowstorms. I worked through holidays when servers needed patching. When Catherine's illness worsened, I brought a cot to the server room and worked between hospital visits. She passed 8 years ago, and the hospital became more than my job, it became my anchor. People knew me, even if they didn't always know what I did. Nurse Hanley in pediatrics always left a ginger cookie on my desk during system upgrades. Dr. Wallace from cardiology once told me, "You're the only reason I can sleep after a software update." Even the custodians knew me. Manuel, the night janitor, used to sit with me during overnight maintenance windows. He'd bring his daughter's school project to show me during breaks. I was part of the hospital's rhythm. All that began changing when Dr. Sears retired last December. The board, wanting a modern leader, brought in Linwood Ashbury. His first move? An efficiency audit. That should have been my warning. He never attended a full IT briefing. Not once. He'd come in halfway through a meeting, check his phone, nod vaguely, then leave before we finished. When I tried showing him the infrastructure map of our interdependent systems, he waved it off. "That's why we're bringing in Parker's team," he said. "They'll map it all for us." Then the consultants arrived. 4 of them. Matching embroidered shirts. Laptops loaded with templates. Their first presentation was titled Disruption as a Service. I tried to explain. This hospital's patient data system connects with 19 different platforms. 2 are federally regulated, 5 are custom-built, and 4 depend on nightly batched jobs that can't be migrated without breaking compliance. I showed them the integration logs, the security patches, the customized workflows. Parker barely looked up. "We've done dozens of these. All standard stuff." But it wasn't. Their system diagrams looked like generic software demos, nothing like the twisted, interlaced reality of Pinewood's live network. They didn't include radiology's RIS/PACS bridge. They forgot the offline prescribing module that only worked on local drives due to a licensing constraint. When I pointed these things out, Parker smiled and said, "Good to know." Except nobody wrote it down. Then came the rumors, contractors measuring the walls in the IT office, clipboard notes about restructuring. I confronted Linwood. "Are we being replaced?" He smiled politely. "We're just exploring opportunities." That night, I updated my resume. I should have seen it coming. But part of me still believed that 15 years of unbroken service, of midnight recoveries and pre-dawn patching, would count for something. It didn't. 2 days after I was walked out, my phone started lighting up. "Hey, Merrill," came a text from Lyle in IT. How do we reroute the imaging system to the backup drive? Scanner interface isn't syncing. Then, do you remember where the config file for the old anesthetic cart reader is? The new guys can't get it to work, wrote Erica from surgery support. I didn't reply. My severance agreement was clear, no unsanctioned contributions or technical support. I sat there in my den, staring at the fireplace, my phone still buzzing. A strange feeling washed over me, not pride, not revenge. Just an anchorless realization. They didn't understand what I did. They thought hospital systems were just apps on a screen, ready to be replaced like last year's phone. They weren't. They were grafted together from necessity, built over time by someone who understood every brittle point of failure. These systems weren't just digital, they were muscle memory. Nurses knew which screen lagged. Doctors knew the workaround for the allergy lookup. My job wasn't to modernize, it was to preserve a nervous system nobody else could see. And now, the nerve endings were starting to go dark. The sixth voicemail came in late Sunday night. Mr. Costin, it's Linwood. We're experiencing unexpected issues with data access in several departments. Please, give me a call. His voice, once clipped and controlled, now carried an edge of uncertainty. The kind of tone a man uses when he realizes the floor is missing beneath his feet. I didn't call back. By Monday, the messages became longer. More desperate. Hi Merrill, this is Parker Wynn. We're encountering some compatibility problems with the prescription database. If you could point us to any legacy conversion tools you used. Another message, 3:02 p.m. The patient registry is behaving oddly. Duplicate records, can't match allergies with medical histories. By evening, the entire surgical scheduling system was offline. That one hurt to hear about. I built that from scratch, after the original vendor went under and their servers stopped supporting Windows updates. The last call that day came from someone I didn't expect. Hey, Merrill. It's Dr. Lenora Bishop. She'd run the ER department for a decade. Didn't use email unless she had to. I'm calling from my personal phone. I just thought you should hear it from someone who still respects what you built here. We had a trauma patient this morning, internal bleeding. Couldn't access records. Had to call his previous hospital, wait on hold. 41 minutes. She paused. We managed. He's stable. But I'm not going to lie, we almost missed a latex allergy. I didn't say anything, just listened. They're talking about going to paper. Temporarily, they say. You and I both know what that means. We've got folks who've never charted manually in their lives. This isn't just inefficient. It's dangerous. She hesitated, then added, Linwood's asking around to see if anyone has your personal number. I didn't give it to him. I hung up, gently. My chest was tight, not with satisfaction, not even with grief. Just a heavy clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't brighten the room. It just makes you see the mess more clearly. That night, I went to the small locked filing cabinet under my desk. Inside was a manila envelope marked WLLOWSTONE, our internal code for emergency continuity. It had printouts. Schematics. A flowchart I'd handwritten during a 3 a.m. power outage in 2017, showing how to reroute lab reports through the maintenance system in case the LAS went down. I ran my fingers over the papers. They'd laughed at me, years ago, for keeping printed copies. Why keep hard copies? Parker had said, half smiling during one of our meetings. We have redundant off-site backups now. Redundancy's a fine thing. Until someone changes the structure and doesn't know what they broke. Tuesday morning, I got an email from Judith Calloway. She was head of compliance. Quiet woman, rarely smiled, but sharp as a tack. She knew the difference between system downtime and system degradation. Subject, inquiry. Merrill, off the record, I wanted you to be aware that multiple departments are reporting technical failures and that the State Health Board has requested preliminary documentation for a potential review. I don't know all the details yet, but I suspect the transition was neither as smooth nor as secure as Linwood claimed. Just wanted to say, some of us know what you did here. And we never thought it was obsolete. I sat there a long while after reading it. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want anyone to fail, not the way it was happening. But justice, sometimes, comes quietly. Through slow unraveling. Through moments when the people who doubted you realize what they lost. That afternoon, I called Jennifer Fay. She was the Director of Systems Development at Mulberry Creek Medical Center, Pinewood's regional rival, 20 minutes north. She'd tried to hire me 3 times over the years. Still got that offer open? I asked. Meryl, she said, voice lighting up, we'd clear a desk for you by tonight if you said yes. I'll need a day. She paused. What's going on down there? Truth, I said. Finally starting to surface. Wednesday, the local paper ran a small column buried on page 3. Tech failure hinders ER at Pinewood Valley. Hospital reverts to temporary paper records. No names. No drama. Just the facts. And yet, it was enough to get phones ringing. Thursday morning, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it ring out. Then, another message, this time from Judith again. Subject, Board Meeting. Meryl, Dr. Luther Clemens, Chair of the Board, has requested your presence at an emergency executive meeting tomorrow morning. I can't say for sure, but word is Linwood's facing serious questions about the system migration. They want answers. And some of us believe they should hear yours. Please let me know if you're willing to attend. I closed my eyes. I'd spent 15 years being invisible, because invisibility is what reliability looks like. You don't praise the air for being breathable. But when it disappears, people notice. I poured myself a cup of coffee. Sat down. And replied. Subject, Board Meeting. I'll be there. 9 a.m. Friday morning. I arrived at Pinewood Valley's executive conference room at 8:45, 15 minutes early, same as I had for every briefing, every emergency meeting, every morning maintenance check for the last 15 years. A few board members were already seated when I stepped in. Dr. Luther Clemens, chair of the board, gave me a quiet nod. Judith Calloway, her folder already open in front of her, offered the faintest of smiles. Dr. Lenora Bishop sat across from her, arms crossed, eyes level and alert. Mr. Costin, Dr. Clemens said, extending a hand. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome, I replied as I shook it. You're here because you're needed. The room slowly filled. Department heads. A few compliance observers. 2 legal reps from the hospital's risk office. Then, 5 minutes before the hour, Linwood Ashbury walked in. He paused when he saw me seated at the table, hesitation flashing across his face. Parker trailed behind him, visibly paler than usual, clutching a laptop like a shield. We'll begin now, Dr. Clemens said, glancing at the clock. This meeting is to assess the state of our hospital's digital systems, following reports of critical failures in patient record access, billing operations, and emergency department functionality. Mr. Ashbury, we'll start with your briefing. Linwood cleared his throat, opened a leather-bound folder, and began. There have been transitional challenges, he said, which we expected. Migrating to a cloud-based platform is not a plug-and-play scenario. The Helix team, our external partners, has been working around the clock to correct unforeseen issues. Define unforeseen, Judith said, flatly. Well, some of the older integrations weren't documented clearly. Legacy workflows weren't always standardized. Legacy workflows, I said, without looking up from my notes, like the hardwired loop that allows our ER prescription tool to function without the pharmacy's live sync. Linwood looked at me, then back at the room. Which, of course, is now being reconstructed. The system needed modernization. You replaced a heart while the patient was still running a marathon, said Dr. Bishop, her voice like ice. Parker opened his mouth to object, but Judith spoke first. We've had to revert to paper for 2 departments. Patient allergy flags are down across multiple units. 3 surgeries were rescheduled. 1 trauma case nearly resulted in a medication error. Silence settled over the room like fog. "Mr. Costin," Dr. Clemens said at last, turning toward me, "you've agreed to provide your perspective. The floor is yours." I stood. Slow. Calm. For 15 years, I had spoken in server rooms and update briefings, often to a crowd of blinking cursors and coffee mugs. This time, every eye in the room was on me. "The systems at Pinewood were built over time," I began. "Not with flashy tools, but with necessity. They were designed to solve real, local problems. To meet the needs of this staff, this facility. Over the years, we added layers. Interfaces. Safeguards. Some elegant. Some improvised. But they worked. Because I knew how every line of code connected to a workflow. I knew which pharmacist always double-checked expiration flags. I knew which nurse used keyboard shortcuts instead of touchpads. And I made sure the systems fit the people, not the other way around. I connected my tablet to the projector. A layout of Pinewood's network appeared. Then the second slide, a documentation archive. Line after line, folder after folder. Meticulous. Exhaustive. Everything was documented, I said. Down to emergency recovery protocols and quarterly tests. A third slide, a comparison matrix. These are the facilities where Helix Solutions has been successfully implemented. You'll notice they're all newly constructed or extensively rebuilt hospitals. None of them involved legacy systems layered over decades. Pinewood, on the other hand. I tapped to highlight our infrastructure map. Nodes blinked red. Has 16 major system interdependencies. 5 of them incompatible with Helix's architecture without manual API bridges. Bridges that, I might add, were not built before migration began. Parker interrupted. "We were told the systems were modular." I looked at him. "Who told you that?" He didn't answer. Dr. Clemens turned to Linwood. "Was that in your technology assessment?" "Yes," Linwood said, voice thinning. "That was based on feedback from department heads and a preliminary audit conducted with Merrill's team. I wasn't part of that assessment," I cut in. "In fact, I was excluded from 2 of the 4 meetings." I advanced the slide to show an internal email from a former colleague. The subject line, Tech Review Notes, Director's Edit. "The audit was edited before being sent to the board," I said. "Key stability metrics were omitted. Issues exaggerated. This wasn't an assessment, it was a pitch." The room murmured. Someone whispered a curse. Dr. Bishop closed her eyes. "The results speak for themselves," I added. "Uptime has dropped. Data integrity has been compromised. Staff confidence is shaken. And patients, our reason for being here, are at risk." Dr. Clemens turned slowly to Linwood. "Did you knowingly alter the assessment?" "I presented the findings as they were interpreted by the consulting team," he said, hedging. "That's not a denial," said Judith. Dr. Clemens looked around the table. "I believe we've heard what we need to. The Helix contract will be reviewed for immediate suspension. Effective today, we begin restoration of our original systems. And Mr. Costin," he turned to me, "we would like to formally offer you the role of Interim Director of Systems Integrity, until a permanent path forward is determined." I didn't smile. "Not yet." "Thank you," I said, "but I'm not interested in being a stopgap." The room tensed. "However," I continued, "if you're offering me a permanent leadership role, where I'm not just maintaining what's invisible, but guiding what's vital, I'll consider it." There was a long pause. Then Dr. Clemens nodded. "We'll draft that offer today." As the room began to shift, Linwood stood abruptly. "You're turning this into a witch hunt." "No," said Dr. Bishop, standing as well. "We're turning it back into a hospital." 3 weeks later, I walked through the front doors of Pinewood Valley not as a technician in the shadows, but as the newly appointed Director of Technology Systems. The air felt different. Part of that, I suppose, was internal. I wasn't moving under the weight of being overlooked anymore. I wasn't the person people bypassed in the hallway with a nod. I had a nameplate outside my office now. It said, Merrill Costin, Director of Systems Integrity. The hospital hadn't just given me back a job, they'd given me a voice. And I was determined not to waste it. The transition back to the original systems was messy. The consultants had left things half-implemented and poorly documented. In some cases, entire databases had been reformatted and corrupted. But I wasn't doing this alone. My first action as director was to assemble a new team. I brought back Erica, the former system liaison. She'd quit after seeing her input ignored during the migration. I rehired Lyle from IT and gave him autonomy over back-end security protocols. And I offered internships to 3 students from the nearby community college's tech program, fresh minds, eager hands. We didn't just rebuild. We studied every failure. Every delay. Every emergency reroute. Every late-night call. And we created a roadmap. It wasn't about rejecting change, it was about ensuring the hospital evolved with intention. I drafted a 5-year modernization plan, modular, adaptive, and centered on clinical needs. Instead of a flashy overhaul, we would improve incrementally, preserving stability at each step. We called it the Riverway Plan, named after the nearby stream that meandered past the town and hospital grounds. Constant motion. Quiet force. 6 months later, Pinewood Valley's systems were not just functional, they were thriving. Response times were better than ever. Patient records were syncing across departments with 0 delay. Radiology's imaging interface, once prone to lag, now loaded in under 3 seconds. Our compliance audit passed with commendations for data retention and security protocol resilience. We didn't chase headlines. We restored trust. One morning, Nurse Hanley from Pediatrics dropped off another of her famous ginger cookies. "Feels like the hospital again," she said. "Like someone's steering the ship with both hands." I kept that cookie on my desk all day. Later that week, Dr. Clemens sent an email. Subject, recognition. Dear Merrill, I'm pleased to inform you that Pinewood Valley has been awarded the Regional Innovation in Healthcare Technology citation for 2025. The award committee cited the Riverway Plan as a model for thoughtful modernization, and the recovery effort under your leadership as an example of patient-centered systems management. Thank you for your integrity, perseverance, and the example you've set. I printed the email and framed it. Not out of pride, but because it marked something rare, a moment when the invisible was seen. That Friday, we held a small appreciation luncheon for the tech department. We'd been through a war together, and I wanted them to know that their late nights, their weekends spent on firewall tests and re-indexing logs, hadn't gone unnoticed. We gathered in the community room. Staff from across the hospital stopped by. Even Dr. Bishop came, balancing a plate of macaroni salad and a coffee cup. "You pulled us back from the edge," she said, quietly, as we stood near the coffee station. "I just reminded everyone what was already working," I said. She nodded. "Sometimes that's the bravest thing to do." A few days later, I got a call from Jennifer Fay at Mulberry Creek Medical. "Heard about the award," she said. "Congratulations, Merrill." "Thanks. And thanks again for the offer." "You sure you don't want a quieter life up here?" she teased. I think," I said, glancing at the framed systems map on my wall, "I'm where I'm needed." She laughed softly. "Well, if you ever change your mind, we'll leave the porch light on." After the call, I looked at the message from Dr. Clemens again. The phrase that stuck wasn't innovation or leadership. It was example. That word means more than a position. It means a pattern to follow. A direction to aim toward. And that was what Pinewood needed, not perfection, not upheaval, but example. One evening, I walked the halls of the hospital after hours, something I hadn't done since the early years. Most of the staff were gone for the night. Lights dimmed. Machines humming softly. The quiet rhythm of care, continuing. I passed the old server room. It was cleaned out now, replaced with a better ventilated, modular rack array. But I paused there anyway. 15 years of problems solved, alarms silenced, systems kept steady through storms both literal and political. Back then, I'd been invisible. The man who kept the lights on. Now, I had a seat at the table. Not because I demanded one, but because truth endures. Even when it's ignored. Even when it's pushed aside. And in time, when failure leaves a void, people go looking for the one who kept the chaos at bay. That person, I realized, was me. But I was never just a technician. I was a steward. A translator between machine and mission. A custodian of continuity. And now, a builder of the future. Pinewood Valley had made its mistakes. So had I. But what mattered was what we chose to do after. We chose clarity. We chose responsibility. We chose care. And for the first time in a long time, I looked toward the coming year not with dread, but with a quiet, enduring sense of peace.